LA Ignite. With me, I've got Jonquil Lowe, and we're going to be talking about her latest book, which is The Good Retirement Guide 2023, 37th edition. Jonquil, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. And just give us an overview of your background in terms of contributing to this book.
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say it's a great pleasure to be here, Tim. So thank you very much for having me on. The book is in the 37th edition. I can't claim credit for all of those, I'm afraid, though it started back in the 1980s with an author called Rosemary Brown. And at the time, I was just cutting my teeth with my own first books about pensions and retirement, which I was writing for Which Books at the time. And I was very much aware of the Good Retirement Guide as being one of our competitors and definitely a book to keep your eye on. And so I was really delighted when a few years back now, Kogan Page approached me and said, would I be interested in taking over this title? And I jumped at the chance because it's got a really good pedigree. So
I mean, I've read it, and it's a fantastic book. So what I wanted to, and one of the things I wanted to do today was say, how do we take a subject which is very, very wide and actually narrow it down? So if there's anybody out there in the audience that's got any particular questions, but what I was going to do was set a sort of an exam question, which would say, I'm in my 50s. Retirement's kind of suddenly appeared on my journey, on my agenda. People are suddenly talking about it. What should I do?
Tim, is this a personal query? Is this you?
It's a very good friend of mine.
Of course, a very good friend. Yeah, well, like you say, it's a big area, and retirement is one of those things that when we're younger we don't really want to think about, and so I think it creeps up on us all kind of a bit suddenly. You get to your mid-50s and retirement is no longer that way distant thing. It's something that's approaching quite fast, and you might even have the opportunity to retire early, which can be very tempting.
We've got friends who retired at 55. Partly because of the organisations that they were in wanted to get rid of them.
Well, sometimes that's not a bad way to go, because very often organisations will then offer an enhanced pension and
my father was retired from the BBC. This is 30 years ago at 55 or 56, and they gave him an enhanced pension to go.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, there are several things that you need to think about, though. Firstly, is retirement for you? Because I think, remember that work is not just about earning money. It's also a source of kind of companionship, self-esteem. And so retirement is not necessarily for everybody. But on the other hand, perhaps stepping back and working part-time or switching to another area of work, maybe starting your own business. Those are all things that sometimes people have as aspirations when the main job stops. But another important aspect, obviously, is, have you got your finances in a row?
Yep.
And essentially, you're looking at two sides of an equation. You're saying, on the one hand, how much income will I need in retirement? And on the other, how much income have I got laid in through my pension planning? So perhaps if we just start with the income side, there are lots of figures bandied around. When I first started working in pensions, the rule of thumb was you want an income that's 2/3 of your income while you were working. And I actually don't think that rules like that are terribly helpful. They often overestimate the amount of income you need. And while that might not seem such a bad thing in one respect, it can actually make the goal of retiring unattainable, because you're trying to save more than is realistic. So it's better to try and be a bit more tailored in your approach. Now, the PLSA, the Pensions and Lifetime Saving Association, a little while ago did an interesting piece of work where they tried to estimate the income that people would need for different types of retirement. So they looked at a kind of minimum retirement, a moderate, and a comfortable. And for the minimum retirement, for a single person, they came up with a sum of £13,000 a year, which is actually quite attainable. When you think about it, the state pension.
State pension is 10,000 a year.
Exactly. From next month, it's 10,000. So you actually don't need very much more just to kind of get by. If you want a more comfortable retirement, if you want what they call moderate, then you're talking more like £23,000. So obviously, a bit of a jump up. And then if you want a comfortable retirement, I think their figure was something like 37, which is really quite a lot. But even these figures are kind of like the ballpark figures. And some of this journey, this financial journey of knowing whether you can survive in retirement, is also about knowing yourself. I mean, you might be a very extravagant person. You might like to go on lots of holidays, in which case you're definitely going to towards that more comfortable level and needing quite a high income. But you might be quite a frugal person by nature, and you might even already have quite a good idea of what you could get by on, because if you've got to a stage of life where perhaps your mortgage is paid off, your children have left home, then you're probably already kind of living on the type of income that you might want in retirement. But you can
because you start off in the book with, you talk about budgeting.
That's right.
And getting your budget right. And then you go on in the next chapter and you talk about pensions and just getting that right for you.
Yep. That's right. So, if you've got that ballpark, you can refine it even more, if you like, by going through a budgeting exercise. So you can look at what you spend now and have a sort of thought experiment about the changes that work will bring, which might be, for example, no longer commuting into work. Maybe you won't need 2 cars, all those kind of things that might change your spending in retirement. Then you need to flip, yes, and look at the other side of the equation. And we've talked about the state pension. Assuming that you qualify for the full state pension, which a lot of people do these days, you need 35 years worth of national insurance
and if you go on to the HMRC website, you can check that out, can't you?
You can check that out. Even better, you can ask for a state pension statement, which will give you an estimate of what your state pension will be. So that's fairly easy to check out. Then you might have pensions from your current employer, past employer. You might have pensions that you've built up yourself, particularly during periods of self-employment. So what you want to do with those is get a statement. Most of them, you'll have a statement once a year anyway. So that might be enough for you to start to get a handle on what your pensions might be. And I think a really important aspect to look at is how those pensions will increase with inflation. This current cost of living crisis has made us all a lot more aware. Though I have to say, when I started work, it was back in the 70s, and inflation peaked then. It was 27% a year was the peak.
I remember when the mortgage rate was on my first house, it was 15%.
Yeah, well, exactly so. So some of us have got that memory locked in about inflation, but even a low rate of inflation eats into your money over time. So even if we go back to 2% a year inflation, if that continues for 25 years, then £100 you have today would only buy the same as £61.
Well, our council tax has gone up 10% this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And if inflation is higher than 2%, then obviously your buying power is being eroded much more quickly. So it's really important to look at how those pensions will keep pace with inflation. And what you'll find is the state pension is more or less index linked. It's a bit more complicated than that, but let's just leave it at that for now. So that's going to retain its buying power. Um, then if you look at pensions from an employer, they are quite likely to increase in line with inflation, but up to a maximum level. Now,
Right.
that's often 5% a year, sometimes it's 3% a year. So in, what we might call kind of like normal times, that might be enough, but obviously it's lagging behind inflation in a period like we're in at the moment. And then when you look at those pensions that you build up for yourself, personal pensions, now usually it's up to you to decide how you turn the kind of savings pot that you build up into a retirement income. And you can choose, broadly speaking, whether or not to build in some inflation proofing or not. And if you don't, then it would be really sensible to think about setting aside some savings from your retirement income so that later on you can draw on those savings if the buying power of your pensions has gone down.
That's great advice. Great advice. So in terms of moving on from pensions, what's someone going to do when they retire?
Yeah, well, obviously that's a very personal choice, but a lot of people, as we touched on earlier, they're not necessarily ready to stop completely, and certainly, if you've had that long held ambition to start your own business, this could be a really great time to do it because with most pension schemes, you have the option to take part of your savings as a tax-free lump sum.
Right.
So that might be really useful if you want to start a business and need a little bit of capital to get going. Um, you might be interested, though, not in self-employment, because I mean, self-employment is not for the faint-hearted.
No, no.
I'm sure as you know.
My parents ended up volunteering. So and my mother's 85, and she still works in a box office of a theatre.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Yeah, that sounds really fun. Or, I've always thought it'd be quite fun as well, being one of those people in a National Trust house.
Yes, yes. She said that she would only do that if she dressed up. If she was allowed to
Oh,
dress up.
right. Very nice. Yes. So,
Yeah, Toya is one of my mother's customers.
oh,
I don't know if you
fantastic.
ever remembered Toya.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed, I do. Yes, yes. No, so that's great. So there's this kind of trio. There's self-employment, there's becoming an employee, maybe doing a job that you're kind of more interested in, but still earning a bit of money, or indeed, volunteering, as you say. And there is such a wealth of areas that you can go into.
Mm.
That it, if you like helping people, um, then there are also all kinds of opportunities for supporting people who are elderly or disabled, befriending, doing shopping, all those kind of things. Um, if you have a financial bent, you might think about volunteering with citizens advice and perhaps
Citizen
giving debt
advice, yeah, that'd be good.
advice, that kind of thing.
Mm.
You've already mentioned there's the arts and historical societies. Um, the list really is absolutely endless, and I think what you choose depends very much on your own particular makeup. Do you like working with people, um, or maybe you're a figures person? Charities are always looking for people to be the treasurer. Nobody ever wants that
Yes.
job. So I think volunteering, there is definitely something out there for everyone, and you can either contact charities direct, or quite often, if you live in a town, you'll find that there's the local authority may be able to advise you on volunteering opportunities, the local library. There may be a local organizer. I know in our high street we actually have a sort of volunteering shop that you can
Oh,
go into, and say, I'm interested in volunteering in this area. What are the options? So yeah, all kinds of opportunities there.
so and the next subject is one about children and grandchildren.
Mm,
Because if we've worked out what we want in terms of our own pension and our own spending, the bank of mum and dad is something that is or even the bank of nanny and grandpa, or whatever, granny and grandpa, or whatever it is something that seems to be more and more popular. I
mm.
mean, we can never budget for these things, but I guess we need to start thinking about this as part of our budgeting process.
Yes, I think one of the really strong messages that comes out of planning your retirement financially is that you may actually realize that you don't necessarily need all of the money that you have set aside.
Right.
And so it might be possible, perhaps, instead of leaving your children to wait, until some future day when they inherit from you, um, you might actually be able to kind of give them a living inheritance, give them some money now.
Mm.
That could be really helpful, especially as you know, kids in their 30s, 40s, many of them, still can't afford to get on the housing ladder. And as you say, the bank of mum and dad may be the way to unlock that opportunity for children or indeed grandchildren. Really important aspect though is don't give away money that you really can't afford to.
Yes.
Um, and when it comes to making sort of big gifts like this, then you want to sort of keep a bit of an eye on inheritance tax. What you give is most likely going to count as a potentially exempt transfer, which means that it's free of inheritance tax, provided you survive for 7 years
7 years.
after making the gift.
Mm.
So, it's something to perhaps think of in your earlier phase of retirement.
Mm. And is that down the same for any other assets that may get passed on?
Well, there are quite a lot of other ways to give lifetime gifts that are free of inheritance tax. But in general, the amounts you can give are smaller than say the deposit for a house.
Mm.
So, for example, you can give £3,000 a year, free of inheritance tax, and if you don't use that allowance in 1 year, you can roll it over to the next year, but only for 1 year. So you could give up to £6,000 in 1 year, and then it reverts back to the 3,000. You can also make gifts on the occasion of marriage.
Right.
So if you're a parent, you can give up to £5,000 to the couple. So that's for each parent. So that could be £10,000 if you have a partner. For grandparents, the limit is £2,500,
Right.
and anyone else, it's £1,000. And then there's a rather curious exemption. You can give any amount without an upper cap, as long as it forms a pattern of regular giving that doesn't reduce your own standard of living.
Okay.
And that could be quite useful. For example, if you wanted to perhaps pay into a pension scheme
Mm.
for your child or grandchild.
Mm.
It can also be used for schemes that usually involve life insurance and trusts, where you can sort of accumulate some money outside your estate that can benefit someone else. I'm being slightly cautious about these schemes because the HMRC is very hot these days on tax avoidance, and you have to be very careful that any scheme that you go into like that actually is a bona fide scheme and will not be attacked by the revenue.
we've seen many instances of tax avoidance schemes that then weren't tax avoidance schemes, because there's been some quite high profile people like David Beckham and that being caught in them, haven't they?
Absolutely. And I think the golden rule really is don't enter into anything that's so complex you can't understand it. You know, play it safe.
Jonquil, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, The Good Retirement Guide 2023. I've read it, and it covers everything you need, really. I mean, it is such a wide subject area, and there's and we didn't have time to talk about it, but there's about setting up your own business, which I quite agree with you that it's not for the faint-hearted, because I've done it myself. And also talking about leisure activities, retiring abroad, what to do about your home, investments. I mean, tax. I mean, it covers just about everything that you need to cover about retirement.
Well, it can't cover it all in depth, but we do support it with a really detailed directory that signposts you to other places to get further information.
And Andrew, who often listens in, says that Jimmy Carr likes a tax avoidance. Yes, I believe he does. Yes. Anyway, The Good Retirement Guide from our friends at Kogan Page. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you, Tim.
Remind people where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. I also work at the Open University, so you can find me there on their website too.
You are on their website, because I found you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about this and sharing your expertise.
It's been a great pleasure.